Alright guys, for this week's Spotlight game, we're going to take a look at a match between Sai and Paulo. I'm not going to attempt to say the names here because I will get them wrong, but we're basically looking at Paulo, who is running a very traditional Stompy deck. Sai is running basically a DelverBlue with a couple of odd choices, but still DelverBlue nonetheless. This is a very important game I wanted to focus on mostly because of the fact that Paulo went 4-0 with his Stompy deck here, and Sai was running Delver and only lost this game, and he did lose to Paulo 0-2. So it shows, I think Stompy is a very good matchup against Delver, and if you're looking to take that down, this may be something you want to consider. Delver is really kind of stepped up in the metagame. It was popular even before the bans, but it still holds a really good presence now because it is something that people are not only familiar with, it is something that control players can balance between aggro and control, and it still holds some pretty good matchups against the current metagame, against things like Affinity and even Familiar Storm. Fisher Post is another thing. It holds up pretty well against things like that. These are popular decks in the current metagame. Delver is not a guaranteed win, but it does work very well in the current meta because it gives you so many different options. It runs a very low counterspell base, but has options as far as returning creatures and reusing the sprites as counterspells, etc. This is a very good match. I think we're going to take a look at Stompy. We're going to show you how it held up. We're going to show you kind of the benefits of playing Stompy. You can understand, hopefully, a little bit of how things work in the matchup and why you can get an advantage through that one. Stompy did have a really big showing right after the bans during that first meta period. Still shows up pretty well. I think it is definitely a top 3 contender and something that you may want to consider if you're looking to take down blue control. As we step into the first game here, there's one thing that I think is important to point out for the matchup between Delver and Stompy. As you can see here, the Stompy player is going first, and this really illustrates the advantage that they can get. They have a lot of creatures that come in at a small casting cost and an okay attack power, much like goblins. You see here, 1 green, 2 attack power. What this means is that it gives the Stompy player a chance to get strong creatures in play and kind of establish its creature base before Delver even has an opportunity to counterspell. As we see here, Paulo has gone first, and this means that he does get this play even before his opponent has a single island on the mat. Now, this is great because obviously they're going to need ideally 2 islands before they can start to counter anything, whether that is counterspell or spellstutter sprite. Spellstutter sprite does get more powerful in this matchup, as it can easily by itself target down these 1 mana cost creatures. Now, you can watch out for Daze. That is going to be the only counterspell that you can see on the first turn off of the first island. That is also something that is not ran as much in these current Delver listings. You did see Force Spike for a little while now, but that tends to be regulated to mostly mono blue control these days. So he's going to find himself in a great position here where he's got himself established and can make a decent push on his first attack before his opponent even has anything set up for a counterspell. The first turn Delver here is going to not be a blocker. Odds are good that he's going to want to keep that and try and flip it to get his own pressure going later on. Things get even better here for Paulo, who puts down a Rancor, and this is very hard to deal with. If Delver does not counter this before it hits the field, it's going to be very hard to get rid of because it's going to come back. He can get rid of it mostly through blocking creatures and killing them off during combat, but they will not have a lot of options for targeting down creatures once they actually hit the board. And even when that does occur, Rancor will still be able to come back. So he's going to be able to swing here on his first attack phase for 4 damage, which is pretty great because once again that Delver is not going to want to block. Now he's going to have an opportunity on turn 2 that he's finally going to be able to get past counterspells. His opponent will finally be ideally at 2 islands and will have that available. Another thing that you need to remember about Stompy is that it gets a lot of great opportunities for its aggressiveness. What you have is a lot of different threats. The Stompy deck tends to run a very low mana base. It can get by on just 2 or 3 lands for an entire game because most of its creatures fall into that single mana cost. It does, occasionally run over into the 2 things like Vines of Vastwood will require 2 mana. But what that does mean is that it can play multiple threats in a turn. In an early game like this, your opponent finally reaches the double island point, the point where he can finally cast a counterspell or 2. he's going to be able to only counter one thing off of 2 islands, and then you can play something else. Ideally, you will have multiple threats, and every card that you're going to have or you're going to want to play is going to be something that your opponent is going to want to counter. So not sure if Sai kept a single land hand there, but he does preordain and then finds his second island for the play. But this also means, once again, that he is tapped out to the point where he cannot use a counter spell at that 2 converted mana cost slot. He could once again use Daze, but again, not something we see so often. So here we are on turn 3, only the second attack of the of Paulo's turn, or of Apollo's game, and he's going to be able to swing through for at least 6 damage, does play a groundswell here and gets the landfall trigger on that. So he's going to be able to not only untap the Sentinel, but he's going to hit Sai for a total of 10 damage, dropping him down to 6 life already. Finally getting the flip on the Delver off of this Ponder that he sees off the top, and he's going to finally Cloud of Fairies. He's made himself kind of a creature wall. He's going to need it to be able to block through these things. The Delver is going to die if he decides to block the Sentinel, and the trample damage is something he has to be aware of. He could, block with the Cloud of Fairies, but he's still going to take more damage off of that single toughness. So when tapping here off of Cloud of Fairies, he is going to use the Ponder ability. Gets that 3rd land into play. And after some debate, he decides that he is going to attempt to snap the Nettle Sentinel. Delver used to be running a couple of copies of Vapor Snag as its option to deal with creatures once they have actually hit the board. This has obviously been dropped in favor of Snap in most decks these days. It's definitely a better trade-off to have the ability to untap 2 lands as opposed to reducing the cost and dealing 1 damage. Snap, allowing it to untap 2 lands gives you opportunities for other counterspell plays. Unfortunately for him, Paulo does have the Vines of Vastwood and is going to be able to give the Sentinel Shroud, basically, and keep that from bouncing it. Even if that had been successful, the Ranker would have returned to his hand, and he could have replayed it on the Pit Skulk. It still would have been beneficial for Sai because of the fact that he could chump block the Skulk. The one, I guess, benefit to facing Ranker would be the fact that it only increases power and not toughness. So swing, this would be fatal damage here, so he's going to be forced to block. Decides to trade the Skulk with the Delver, and then take the extra damage off of the trample on the fairies. An interesting move, but it does, get this Skulk off the board. A little bit more beneficial to do that for the Delver player because of the fact that there is a chance, even though it is small, that the Sentinel will not be able to untap later on. You get to a point occasionally in Stompy, much like Goblins, where he has 2 cards in hand now, and it's going to reduce the chances that he may have a green spell to play to untap the Sentinel. So by getting rid of the Skulk, he is going to try and hope that the Sentinel will be unable to untap, and that Paulo does not have another green spell. For now he does. Ledgewalker is going to come down, and this is even harder for Blue to deal with because of the fact that he couldn't counter it, and it has Hexproof. So Frostburn Weird is going down. This is going to be a great opportunity for some blocking because of the fact that it does have the 4 toughness. Phantasmal Bear is also a decent size and going to be able to trade for things like the Sentinel. Do have to be aware of extra trample damage here, so if he was going to block the Sentinel, odds are good that he would have to double block. He right now cannot block the Ledgewalker because it can only be blocked with flyers. Also good to note that Stompy, if it really wanted to, could kill off the Phantasmal Bear with a pump spell. Odds are good that if you were going to do that, it might be a misplay because of the fact that most of the pump spells that Stompy has available to it are going to give a creature significant damage past a 2 toughness, and you would obviously be trying to do that off of something like Trample and not something that jumps. So, double blocking, as we said, he is going to decide to deal that 4 damage to the Weird, as opposed to the Bear, because that gets the big blocker off the board. That also can be a decent sized attacker later on because of the ability to pump itself up. Ranker is going to be returned to hand as the Sentinel dies, but he can replay it on this Ledgewalker, and unless Sai gets a blocker in the form of a fairy, he is going to be out of luck. Delver is going to be too slow here because it's going to swing for fatal damage on the next turn, and so Sai will not have an opportunity to flip it. His only option to get back in this game is going to be a blocker that has flying. So, off the draw. Does get Spire Golem, which is a great option here. Not quite the ideal. He is going to have to pay the 3 to put that into play, but it is going to be big enough to block the Ledgewalker and keep it at bay, and that's going to be trouble. Kind of stalls things out for a little while here until Paulo can get some damage past. His only option for an attack there would have been to throw the young wolf away and get it pumped up, but really no need to do that. He can just sit back and wait because he is definitely at the advantage here. All he's looking to do most likely is going to be draw extra pump spells, whether that's Vines of the Basswood or Groundswell or another ranker, so that he can get this Ledgewalker's damage through. Going to be tough as well. Delver is a little bit mana short at this point in time, only having the mana available to a single counterspell, but he is going to have to look for an opportunity to get past those counterspells. Gush comes in, allowing him to draw some cards, and he's going to replay lands. This does allow him to get to that point with the 2 lands he needs for counters. Things get drawn out here. He's going to attack. At this point in time, Sai has to block because this is fatal damage. So if Paulo is going to be attacking, he's obviously not going to be bluffing because of the fact that the Ledgewalker will just die to the Golem's block. So odds are good that he does have a pump spell. What he may be trying to do here is going to be look for an opportunity to simply draw out a counter spell. With 6 cards in hand, odds were good that Sai did have it. He does throw down a Spell Stutter Sprite, which is going to be enough alone to counter this Hunger of the Howpack. But as you did see there, the Groundswell comes in. He did have 2 in hand, which is really what he needed. Drawing a single one out is not a great opportunity there. If he were to just have the Howpack, it would not be beneficial to him to just try and draw out a counterspell. What he wanted to do is use a situation like this and just get it over with. If he uses the Howpack alone here, draws out the counterspell, well, now he still needs 2 pump spells to get through to find an opportunity, because he's basically just wasted a turn and allowed Sai opportunities to find more counters, to get more land, and, you know, build up more counter options. It really needed this to have both and an opportunity to get through there. In the second game, Sai is going to have the start. Not really going to give him a lot of advantage, though it would be ideal if he did manage that turn 1 Delver play. I think a lot of the times Stompy likes to go first. It is going to have just a lot of drops at 1 anyways, so it doesn't matter. You're going to see the Archer is going to be a sideboard option that was brought in here. A great option here because that 1 damage to flying is a great thing to pick off all of the different Fae that are going to come into play. It can reduce the number on the field so that a Spell Stutter Sprite will not counter as many things. Unfortunately, a lot of the creatures for Stompy come in at that single converted mana cost, which is going to be a great thing for Delver because it does not need multiple fairies on the field to counter things. So his first creature does get snapped right away, and that is going to force him to replay things. I always mess up the word. I'm just going to say the Ranger. Ranger's attempting to come down, but Spell Stutter Sprite, as I said, is going to easily be able to counter things off. An interesting play because of the fact that the Ranger versus the Archer, you know, the Archer is something that will allow him to pick off the Flyers and the Fae. But again, like I said, Delver does not necessarily need to have those Fae into play to make the counter spells because of them. The majority come in at that single mana cost. The Ranger is going to provide a lot of opportunities here for Paulo to get away with a single land hand because of the fact that it can tap for green. He can return that to his hand and then replay that land if he is missing a land drop. But the fact that he does have the second forest does allow him the opportunity to get that Archer right back into play. Going to take some damage off of this Flyer right away. Ninja comes in. Definitely an unfortunate situation. That is one great benefit to the Archer, is the fact that it can pick off those Flyers so that you can't sneak a Ninja in there. Safehold Elite is going to come down, as well as Young Wolf. Daze, it seems that he is running, is going to come and stop the Wolf at the very least. Very kind of tough decision there, perhaps, because of the fact that Sai only has a single island available to him. Unfortunately, we can't see his hand, so odds are good that he didn't have another island, and he's going to just be able to sneak by on one right now. Doesn't attack with the ninja because he knows he's going to just be trading with the elite, and the elite is going to mostly sit back and be able to block that all day. An aggressive start here, attacking through with that. It's going to, dare Sai to use the quicksand to get rid of it. His odds are good he's not going to use the ninja to block. He's going to want to be able to swing with that later on so he can get the card draw out. Pauper attempting to put Young Wolf down is going to be hit with that Spell Stutter Sprite that he did know was there. Archer is going to attempt to take that out, and Sai is actually going to be able to use Mutagenic Growth to pump that up. Some interesting card choices here for Sai because Delver is not usually known to have things like that. Must be a sideboard option, will be my assumption. I can give it a very aggressive start if he does get Mutagenic Growths in the early game. It almost seems like a big transformation from game 1 to game 2 from Delver to a mono blue control. But he does have a lot of the key components here. Another Safehold Elite is going to come down and again provides him a great blocker for the ninja, and that's going to cause Sai all kinds of trouble. He really needed that ninja early on and that extra card draw so he could establish himself better. For Delver or mono blue control, either way, to be down to 2 cards in hand, it's going to be very difficult for him to rebuild and establish presence. Sprite is going to do some damage here, but the Archer will eventually just pick that off. And having the 2 Safehold Elites allows him the opportunity to be aggressive and continue to attack through, while leaving one at home to stop the ninja. Ledgewalker is going to come down, attempting to flip the Delver. Does get it off of a Preordain. And he's going to have a lot of great options here for swinging through. The Archer is going to target down those flyers. That off there. When he is attacking through with the Ledgewalker, it's going to be simply chump blocked by the Delver if he leaves that untapped, unless he does get some pump spells, so he may leave that back in that situation. Kind of both players playing a little defensive at points in the first game. This time they're looking a little more aggressive as he's swinging through with that. Spire Golem is going to be able to come down here. It's going to provide a great opportunity for blocking. You see, Pauper's reached that point in time I said can be a difficult time for Stompy when they've reached the kind of top deck mode, I like to call it. He only has 2 cards in hand, really looking for draws on all of those that are not land. So swinging through here, still trying to be aggressive. He does have some options here because the Archer can pump things basically by 1 by the fact that it does that single damage to flyers. So all he needs is 3 to kill the Golem. And he does have options here as far as pump, it looks like. And we'll see what he works his way into. Nope, decides not to do it because there are no blocks. Yeah, attempting, can't decide how aggressive Sai wants to be. You know, when you're at 10 life, I'm always the first one to say that it's a good idea to take some damage and work your way down. But when you reach this point about 10 life, you're halfway to death and you're really unsure. It seems that he is going to still try and be aggressive with the Delver since there are no blocks. It looks like he may have a ninja here as well to get that in. That's great for him because he's going to be able to start drawing and get his hand back together and replay that Delver if he so desires. Gush is going to help him with the land drops. And puts down Frostburn Weird, which is going to be another great blocker at that 4 toughness. It's really great for Delver these days, having the Golem and the Frostburn Weird. It really kind of helps it match up against aggro in a better way because of the fact that it can sit there and block for days. Now the only thing that would be able to get through here is the Ledgewalker, and that's going to be facing the Spire Golem. So again, some options to continue attacking through with that if he can manage 3 damage, thanks to the fact that the Archer is going to be able to do that additional 1/2 flyers. So does decide to actually double block on the Safehold Elite. That's going to be able to persist. Looks like he is going to throw out a Groundswell. And a great play here in response, Sai decides to use the Quicksand and kill that off. And it looks like actually Pauper had another pump spell available. Vines of Aswood is going to come down. That's a great move for him because of the fact that it's going to prevent that 2 -1, -2 damage. basically, and the Groundswell is going to pump that as well. He's going to be able to kill off both the Spire Golem and the Frostburn Weird. He did have to empty his hand to do so, but I think that's a great move on his part. So, not a huge loss here for size. He does find a third land, throws out a Curse of Chains on the first Safehold Elite, and throws back the Delver of Secrets. So now he has no flyers. He is going to be forced to take at least 1 damage off the Ledgewalker. Paulo will probably try and be aggressive here because of the fact that the ninjas, you really don't want them to die. The Delver player wants to keep those around. Ranger is a great option here for untapping on the Curse of Chains. What a great play. So swinging through here, like I said, trying to be aggressive. It's a great idea here with the Ranger. Basically allows him to cancel out the Curse of Chains every turn. And then he can swing with this one. Obviously a better play than swinging with the one without Curse of Chains because of the fact that he wants to be aggressive, but he knows that he could lose it. Losing that, blocking that is great for him on all sides because Sai would lose a ninja. The Safehold Elite would come back and would lose the Curse of Chains. It does get a little smaller, but it's a really great position to be in if you were Paulo. So attempt to flip the Delver is a failure. Definitely a bad position here for Sai. 2 cards in hand. It looks like he debated swinging through with the ninjas. Like I said, when you're Delver or Mono Blue, any kind of blue control deck, you really need those ninjas to refill your hand. It is really kind of the bulk of their draw is going to come off of those spells. And so he really wants those to get through, do some damage, and draw some cards. Because when you have 2 cards in hand, you really have a hard time controlling the tempo of the board. Curse of Chains is going to attempt to tap out this Elite once again, but we know now that the Ranger can sit here and untap that all day. So he is going to continue to be aggressive here, and he should, as he is in the advantage here. No blocks still from Sai, and really doesn't want to trade those ninjas, and I do not blame him. It's a tough situation to be in, and he is going to make attempt number 2 to flip the Delver, and either it is a failure or he does not want to reveal. Odds are good that it is a failure. Delver is another deck that can operate usually if you have 4 lands. I think is an okay spot for Delver. You can reach 6+ and feel a little flooded because odds are good that your hand is down at this point in time. That's not such a big deal if you have the draw spells and you can fill your hand up, but it can at this point in time be a very difficult position to be in. So the creature wall continues to build. The Ranger continues to untap that Elite and basically cancel out completely that Curse of Chains. With the play on the Nettle Sentinel, he is going to continue to be aggressive, use his second Safehold Elite here to attack through. The bear is going to apparently block 1. He is going to finally have to sacrifice a ninja for another because of the fact that that would have been fatal damage. So both of those die, but the persist is going to come into effect, and these are going to return as 1/1 creatures. Kind of a great thing about Stompy is the fact that it can get around kill spells and trades in combat. Shows another land, and I'm guessing that at this point in time he is just drawing dead. Obviously very flooded at this point. So a swing through here with everything should be game. So you can see this is a great opportunity to see how Stompy matches against Delver. There is a great opportunity for you to get a large creature wall and just power through more threats. And, if you can play more threats than they have counterspells, that's going to put you in a great position to win the game against Delver.